pass it over to Terry.
Thank you very much. Yeah, always very well done. Again, my name's Terry Cook, and I'm the program coordinator for the Food for Thought Summit, brought to you on behalf of Transition Nanaimo. I would like to first begin by acknowledging that where I am taking part in this summit is now known as Nanaimo and is situated on the traditional and unceded territory of the Coast Salish peoples, the traditional territory of the Nanaimo and Snunnaaz First Nation. I invite you to think about your own land acknowledgement where you are, or type it up in the chat room, and I'll give you a pause just so you can do that. Thank you very much. Just a couple of infomercials. We are obviously encouraging people to join Transition Nanaimo, to join us in this movement. If you go onto our website, you can find out how to join, and there's a membership form that will be sent to you. There's also another important tab, and that's the Donate tab. So if you like what you've seen, if you have some extra dollars that you want to contribute to the cause, we invite you to do that. We made it fairly simple. We are committed to accelerating our transition to a thriving low-carbon future in Nanaimo and beyond. And we're working on a number of projects and initiatives to achieve this goal. So your support as a member, as a donator, would really be appreciated. Now, turning over to this session, I'm very excited. I've made my career in community engagement, and I've been following the Reimagine Nanaimo process with a lot of interest. I think their techniques, their tools, their communications have been top notch. And you know, as a longtime member of the International Association for Public Participation, or IAP2, we strive to really encourage good techniques, best practices. And I think, you know, Reimagine Nanaimo is amongst the best I've seen in the recent future. Today we're joined by Rob Lawrance, Environmental Planner, Kirsty MacDonald, Parks Planner, and Karin Kronstal, Social Planner, all with the City of Nanaimo, and obviously working deeply on this project. They've billed their session as a big picture overview of where Nanaimo is headed in terms of climate action and food security through the Reimagine Nanaimo process. It's a coordinated strategic plan review, as well as some fun details on specific projects and initiatives that you can get going on in your neighborhood or backyard. So they've got a PowerPoint, and then, like I said, we'll have, like Shea said, we'll have a Q&A through the chat, or if people have raised their hand, you can ask questions on video if they would like. Okay, I'll now turn it over to Rob, who will start us off.
Thanks, Terry. Thanks, Shea, for the warm welcome. And we all, you know, Karin and Kirsty and myself really appreciate the time you're offering us to share a little bit of background about Reimagine Nanaimo and where we see potentially some opportunities around food security and agroforestry, and have a bit of a discussion with everyone about some ideas and thoughts about where you see Nanaimo heading in that direction. And hopefully we can have a good conversation and come up with some interesting approaches and ideas that we could include in the Reimagine process. So I do have a slideshow. I'm going to quickly switch to that. And myself, Karin, and Kirsty are going to kind of co-present. So at various points, one of us will take the lead and do the presentation. And yeah, we're going to cover a few different areas. Like I say, as Terry had mentioned, an introduction into the Reimagine Nanaimo process. And then kind of leading into specifically the donut economics framework, a little bit of the background about where that came from and some of the steps that have come along the way, plus examples of what other communities have been doing around donut economics and how they've tried to kind of make it their own. And then a bit of a focus on carbon reduction. There's some really aggressive carbon reduction targets that the city has set through the Climate Emergency Declaration that was done last April in 2020. And or 2019, sorry. But there's some significant challenges and potentially some opportunities when looking at the food production, agroforestry perspective, and maybe some opportunities that we could be looking at in the city here. And then we want to kind of really look at specific programs and around food production that is going on currently in parks, and then have a bit of a question and answer period at the end and discussion around some ideas and thoughts that you might have, or questions that you might have about what the city's programs are and where we go from here. So very quickly, and then I'll pass to Karin in a few minutes, just to give you a sense of what Reimagine Nanaimo is really about. It's really a very comprehensive review of a number of key planning documents that the city has, and many communities have. An official community plan, a parks and recreation culture plan update, an active transportation plan update. The city has a climate action plan that's also being reviewed, and an economic plan and a water supply strategic plan. Often these plans are, when they're reviewed and updated, they often happen in isolation of each other. So Reimagine Nanaimo is really a unique opportunity to combine all these processes together and do more to integrate them and create a final document that really speaks to all these priority issues around land use, around how we use our parks, around how we travel and move around the city, and how we address issues like climate action and improve our economic development and water supply. This is a busy chart, but this is kind of giving you the big picture on the process itself for Reimagine Nanaimo, and it's a 3-phase process. And as many of you may have participated over the last fall, the first phase was looking at gathering ideas. So through our online surveying, the mail-in survey that we had sent out, plus through a number of engagements that many staff and community groups have participated in, we were gathering ideas and thoughts and responses to questionnaires about how they want to see Nanaimo in 20 years, in 15, 20 years, and what are some of the priority issues that need to be addressed as we continue to grow. We've just kind of passed the 100,000 mark as a community in population. So, and there's certainly many new challenges that we have now that we didn't necessarily think about when the last official community plan was adopted just a little over 10 years ago. So
Rob, can I jump in for a sec?
Of course.
I just want to say, I put in the chat here a link to the Get Involved page for this project. And if you go on to it, you'll see the first thing when you scroll down will be quickly understand donut economics, which we're going to talk about in a minute. But if you keep scrolling down, you'll see view the phase 1 engagement summary. So if you participated in any part of phase 1, you want to see the summarized engagement results, the document's right there. I don't be scared if you open the appendices by accident. It's like 1,200 pages long. It has all the meeting notes, but the phase 1 summary really does a beautiful job of summarizing all those inputs. Oh, and there you go. And Rob's put up on the slide here all the different types of inputs. And if you saw those spray painted sidewalk chalk things, Kirsty was responsible for those. So there's lots of creative ideas in the times of COVID of how we could reach out to people in new ways.
Perfect. So I can run the show, the slides, if you carry on, Karin.
Sure,
so
sounds good.
To switch over.
So I'll just quickly introduce myself. As Terry mentioned, my name is Karin Kronstal. I'm a social planner with the City of Nanaimo, which means I work primarily on issues around housing and homelessness and other sort of social issues, social determinant of health issues. But I'm really privileged in this process to work with my colleagues in different departments. As Rob mentioned, this is a really unique process. We looked for other communities who had done it this way. We didn't really find any that had done it exactly this way. And then layered onto that was the challenges of COVID and not being able to engage and going out into the community in the usual ways that we might. So we've been challenged, but really impressed by the response that we got. This was with the response for the surveys was the biggest response we'd ever gotten, the online response. There were also hard copies available. And something that was really impressive to me reviewing the results was that the majority of people who filled out either an online questionnaire or a statistically valid survey were participating in a city process for the very first time, which, as you know, Terry would know as an IAP2 alumni, getting new people involved in planning processes is a big challenge. So we've been so grateful and impressed by the community response to this process. Next slide, please. So they asked me to come, even though I'm not as much involved in the local food production end of things as Kirsty and not as much involved in the environment things as Rob, because I've been a little bit more involved in this aspect of the project that touches on the donut economics model. So we thought we'd give you a little bit of a primer. And again, if you go to that Get Involved website, there's more information and videos on this. It's really fun to look at, and it's a very innovative and well, it does build on existing models for sustainable development. It's a cool way of combining a bunch of different thoughts. So to give you a basic overview, this idea originates from the book Donut Economics, which was written by an Oxford educated economist, Kate Raworth, called Donut Economics from 2012. And really, it's a way of thinking about community development or national development. It can be at any scale, where there's an ecological ceiling where we think about the overall carrying capacity of the Earth with these various, as you can see on the outside, various aspects of Earth's carrying capacity. Thank you, Rob. And then on the inside are all of the social needs. So if you think we want to keep everybody out of a place of social deprivation without exceeding the carrying capacity of the Earth, then the safe space is in the middle there in the donut. So that's the basic concept, and it gets much more nuanced. I mean, it's a whole book, not to mention a movement, but that is the fundamental core principle. Next slide, Rob. So there's, as I mentioned, there's been many ways of articulating this desire to meet everybody's basic needs without exceeding the ability of the Earth to see the future. The 1987 Brundtland Report is one of them. But even beyond that, there's a natural step, all kinds of things. But I think that this way that Ms. Raworth has articulated it is really well suited for our times because it can scale, as we will see, down to the local level. And it is often cities, because cities are a little more nimble than other levels of government in terms of our ability to respond, that have been adapting this, more so than national governments. So what is a downscale donut? Well, we also call it a city portrait because that's what the donut economics people call it. And it's a good name. I'm actually going to put in the chat here as well a link to their website because they do some neat stuff. And some of the stuff I'm going to be referencing is available through their website when it comes to other cities. So the city portrait, as it's been developed in places like Amsterdam, is a snapshot of how we're doing on 4 levels: ecological local, ecological global, social local, social global. So there's sort of 4 quadrants, and you can evaluate this on a number of metrics, and we are. So it's exploring how the city is performing on these 4 quadrants. Next slide. So we have decided, or we decided, council has decided and given us direction to embed this donut into the Reimagine Nanaimo process. Oftentimes in city plans, there is some sort of evaluation criteria or evaluation framework. What this is doing is it's predetermining a evaluation framework for all of our city plans, or trying to develop a common set of evaluation criteria as well as targets to meet. So that's the place that we're at right now, is as a team and working with council and committees, determining which are the appropriate indicators and targets to use when developing this donut. Because as you can imagine, there's many things we could measure, but not all of them are meaningful in terms of measurements. Not all of them are things we can measure, and not all of them are things that are within the city's ability to control. So those are the sort of the key things that we want to I'm seeing questions. I'll address that in a sec. Key things that we want to determine. Is it measurable? Is it meaningful? And is it within the city's control? And here we go, baking the donut. There are a number of things that the city already measures, and also there's things the province measures, I think the regional district measures. So we're looking both at past metrics and existing metrics and where we have benchmarks. And then from there, it is going to be the basis for which the discussion. Now I'm going to go to the question, because I think it was relevant to what I was saying. One question, so it was, will you be engaging the public in the formulation of the indicators? You know, we are not going to be engaging the public on the indicators, but we are going to be engaging the public on the targets, which is related but different. So if you think like, if the indicator, say, is GHG, then the targets are going to be associated with different scenarios. So you can imagine there are various future development scenarios which would have different GHG emission implications. So that is where, when we go back out to the public in phase 2, we'll be presenting different scenarios. And because we'll have these targets identified, then that will allow us to say, in this scenario, this is what is achieved under this indicator in terms of a target. Under this scenario, this is what is achieved. But we aren't just doing it as staff. We just had a large workshop with council and the Environment Committee and the Accessibility and Inclusion Committee, as well as some representatives from the Health and Housing Task Force, just this past Wednesday, looking at indicators, and some experts from the province, the regional district, who work with indicators frequently. So it's certainly not something that staff's doing on its own, but we're focusing our community engagement efforts more around the targets than the indicators themselves. I hope that answers your question, Dawn. Next slide, please. So this is just showing you like we're aiming to align with the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Next slide. Using the old-fashioned donut, which is sort of the original donut. Next slide. And we're also integrating all the input, and this goes for selecting indicators as well as targets. We've received a huge amount of input from the community on these 6 domains about how we move, how we work, how we care. I mentioned, because it's an integrative plan process, and this was one of the really beautiful things for me as a planner going out through this process, is oftentimes I would go to a meeting that was supposed to be about a specific community plan, and then somebody would come to me and they'd say, well, I don't live in this area. I actually live on the other side of town, and I have this issue with the traffic here. And you sort of say, okay, I can connect you with the appropriate person. But in this planning process, we're actually able to take in any kind of input because it all connects. And next slide, Chris, I'll get to that in a minute. Here is just looking at where do we already have, because actually, as Rob mentioned, we already have some targets established. So one of the things we're also considering is where do we already have council endorsed targets and indicators, as well as where does the regional district have them? Because of course, being a huge component of the regional district of Nanaimo, we contribute to the regional growth strategy targets. And next slide. Rob? Thank you. This is
hello.
This is the Amsterdam example, and I encourage you, if you're interested in this, to go and actually read the city portrait they developed. They did this in a much more extended timeline, so the document is very detailed, and also Amsterdam is a completely different situation in terms of the amount of control the city has over various things, but it is fascinating, and they're doing amazing work. They're sort of the first big city to have adopted this model, so go on the website and check it out, and you'll see. Next one. There's also other totally different interpretations of the donut that draw on similar principles, but sort of reimagine them. Here's a Maori example where the earth is at the center and the social well-being is sort of hugging the outside. And when I saw a presentation on this, it was like, they really, in the Maori culture, I think many indigenous cultures see the earth as fundamental. So it needs to be there as the core and everything else surrounds. So there's lots of different ways to read. And Ms. Ryworth has been very gracious about people using this in various culturally appropriate ways. So next slide. So this is kind of the draft of what we have right now. You can see outside we have our earth domains and the ecological ceiling. We have our Reimagine input, holding the social foundation, and in there we've labeled sort of 4 different domains of social well-being and that connect both to the environment and to the social landscape. Now, I think Chris had said, how do you plan to do engagement phase 2? Well, we're just kind of writing as we're, what did Lisa say the other day? My boss, she said something like, one of the situations where you feel like you're building the ship while you're flying it, just because the pace has been quite quick, and also this direction around the donut came sort of at the end of phase 1. And so we're very happy to incorporate it into this process, but it has stretched out our timeline a little bit, not as much as perhaps some of us wish it had, but phase 2, we're going to go back to the public in hopefully April, but it may end up being May, with some scenarios for land use and parks and culture and climate action. And that will be what we're asking for input on, to say, okay, this is what we've heard about these things. Here's the indicators we've identified through this process. Here's some scenarios that have various implications for these different targets. What do you think? And it won't be like A, B, or C. It'll be like, maybe you'll ask one aspect of one scenario and a different aspect of the second scenario, and those can be blended, mixed, and matched. Because we're working on multiple types of plans at the same time, it's a little more complex than your typical OCP, where you have sort of like a high density, medium density, low density. It won't be that simple, but we're working on it right now, Chris, and you'll be the first to know. How's that? And I think that's my last slide.
Yeah, and I was going to jump off from here. And so I've got a couple of slides. I wanted to kind of go down a couple of examples on the ecological ceiling side, and starting off at the climate change. So as Karin had talked about, there's a lot of the fundamental social foundations that have been identified through our council documents and priorities that have been kind of already set by council. And obviously through Reimagine, we've identified these various kind of touch points currently for how we want to live. And the ecological ceiling, as Karin had touched on, is also being looked at now through review of our indicators, but also identifying our targets and seeing how we can kind of meet some of the targets where they exist. And climate change is certainly one of them. And as I mentioned earlier, back in April 2019, we did set a very aggressive target for a community matching the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change's target to try and be carbon neutral, essentially, or carbon zero by 2050. But the 2030 target is also quite aggressive and coming quite fast as far as what we can achieve in the next few years. But when we're looking back at emissions that have been recorded to date, we see a bit of a concern or a challenge. So when looking at emissions in kilotons here between 2010 and 2017, which was the last year that we could get a data available up to now, we're seeing that there's certainly been an increase in emissions, irregardless of the fact that our earlier targets that we had set was trying to reduce by 33% by 2020. We've actually increased it by 2017. So we're running into a challenge because clearly our current policies and planning, the land use planning is likely not enough to meet our emissions reduction, particularly the one that has been recently included or added by council. So we can see just by following current policy, current land use practice, a 32% shortfall by 2050. So we won't meet the zero target. We'll be short by about 20 to 32% or so. So we are kind of at a point where we need to start thinking outside of the box. We need to start looking beyond obviously what we're currently doing and trying to see some new approaches about how we address land use, transportation, but obviously other factors and other ways of using the land that can help sequester carbon and help us bring our emissions levels down. And clearly food production, agroforestry, natural restoration can be one of those practices. And that's something we are looking at. And I think part of that is a bit of a mindset change around how we work with nature directly. So as opposed to seeing as an externality where our engineered infrastructure empties into, whether that's a lake or a water course or the marine environment, it's a natural asset. So trying to see it as for what it is and the ecological services that it provides, and providing support, whether that's financial or some restoration work to try and maintain it and enhance it into the future. There's definitely an interest in our council around that, and we're working toward developing a strategy and an inventory of our natural assets that kind of speaks to that and better integrates it into city infrastructure and community infrastructure and recognizes the values that it does provide the community. Another approach, and it's a lot of it's from volunteers in the community approaching the city saying we want to do more to enhance the environment, to plant trees, to be involved in restoration projects. And we've seen a bit of a rise in that in the last few years, and we expect to see more of that. But simply planting a tree can do so much. It's a simple act. It sequesters carbon, but it also helps us prepare for a changing climate by helping us create those areas of shade and respite for people in the future when the temperatures and weather will be much more severe in the future, and we expect that. But as I'm sure many of you are thinking about now, there's an opportunity for food protection, for agriculture, for agroforestry, and how we do that on the land within the city that can help contribute to sequestering carbon and making the production of food a much more sustainable venture than it is now, with the long transportation networks that are out there now to try and bring food to local populations. What more can we do in the community to try and make that so much of an easier thing to achieve? I think that's kind of where we're at now, and looking for those opportunities together. And I guess the last point I wanted to add really quick was, again, because of climate change and what we can anticipate in the future, we're going to need to start to change how we plant, what we plant, and rethink some of those old assumptions about what's an appropriate species to plant, at least particularly for native vegetation and restoration work. I think many of us have seen some changes already. I noticed there's been some dieback and some effects on local cedar. I also see that in Salal in some of our parks, and this is happening up and down the coast of East Vancouver Island. And it's partly to do with the drying conditions that we're seeing in some of the hotter summers, and we can expect more of this. So these are the challenges we need to kind of address, and I'm hoping we can have a bit of a discussion after this session and then speak about this a little bit more. But just to kind of finish off, and just to kind of give a bit of a sense of that opportunity, there was 70% of our parkland is natural area, so it's over 1,000 hectares of city parkland, and just around 450 hectares are in some kind of a protected status, whether that's with the provincial government through some of our local parks, or the nature trust lands through, like, for example, Buttertubs Marsh or the Nanaimo Estuary. There's certainly lots of examples of key properties where there is protected land and opportunity to do more work to restore and enhance these lands so that they're more biologically diverse and restored to a higher level than they are now. So that concludes my talk. I wanted to pass it over to MacDonald, who wanted to touch on some of the food production programs now that currently are in the park system. So over to you, Kirsty.
Thanks, Rob. I know the last slide that Rob just had up highlighted that there's about 1,000 hectares of park in Nanaimo, and half of it is undeveloped. And I guess that's where some of the trends and new initiatives in parks, recreation, and culture I'm going to share for you are mostly happening on that 500 or so hectares of land that's undeveloped in Nanaimo's parks. And since 2007, a lot of community groups have wanted to develop community gardens and different growing initiatives on this undeveloped land. And the city has helped to facilitate that and make it happen. So really, it's a trend to grow food on city-owned land in Nanaimo, at least since about 2006, 2007. Each initiative has a maintenance agreement with the different growing group. I see in the chat, I see that there are some of you, I think, that are involved in some of these groups, such as Nanaimo Community Gardens, and also on Protection Island. I saw a couple of people from Protection Island, and they have the Douglas Island Garden Society actually developed the first community garden in Nanaimo, and we'll have some pictures about it in a minute. And it's been such a success. So those of you that know those sites know how they become a hub in the community. There's also a number of fruit trees that are currently in parks that are available for public gleaning. There are communal beds in many parks as well, where anyone can go and pick and take food for consumption. There is one greenhouse on Bevan Park that's a community built greenhouse. And there's also many projects where demonstration gardens are being set up where food is the focus around town. And this picture on this slide at Bevan Park is one example of a garden that the city horticulture staff have put in and it's a communal bed, allowed people last year to take food during COVID times. And there are several of them like that around town where people can go and glean as they want. Next slide, Rob. Thank you. So there are 7 gardens right now, community gardens right now in city parks. And some of you might know a few of these sites. We mentioned the one on Protection Island, which is the Smugglers Park Diggs Garden. There's also a substantial garden at Beaufort Park, and that one is managed by the Nanaimo Community Garden Society. The VIX actually manages the Beban Urban Gardens, which is beside the Pitch and Putt Golf Course at Beban Park. Possum Park, which is in the Old City Quarter, has a garden adjacent to a playground. Forest Drive Park, which is near the Tim Hortons on Bowen Road, also has a community garden adjacent to the playground. And the Beban Park also has the greenhouse I mentioned and a learning garden center, again, near the Pitch and Putt Golf Course. And then the newest community garden in Nanaimo Parks is in Harewood, across from Park Avenue School, and it is managed by Nanaimo Food Share. There are also 4 food forests now on city-owned land. Some of these are in parkland and some are on road right-of-way. And you might find these as you're walking through a park, and because they're coming up more and more. But the food forest really is a combination of many productive types of plants and trees, and they are open for public gleaning as well. So there's usually a layered effect of canopy trees that are edibles, as well as shrub layers that are edible and different ground covers that are also edible. Nanaimo also has one park, which is 12 hectares or 30 acres, and it is along East Wellington Road. It is along the Millstone River corridor, and it is in the Agricultural Land Reserve. So this is our only site that's city-owned in Nanaimo that actually falls within the ALR designation. And currently we are working with a consultant to develop an agricultural capability study for the site to find out what future crops might be suitable to put on the site if community demand and desires warrant. And also we're exploring different partnership opportunities and prescriptions for agroforestry along the river setback area. So really looking at how to integrate some edibles in what is going to be a new buffer zone along the river. So up till now, all of the food production in Nanaimo parks or on city-owned land has been completely community-driven. The city just facilitates it. But this East Wellington project might be something that the city is more of a leader on, or works with various community groups to make it happen and have some production in the future on this site. Of course, there's many other types of harvesting and foraging that can be done in city parks as well. And many of, well, probably all the fishing docks and boat launches that are in Nanaimo are on parkland. And people are, of course, using them to catch fish, crabs, and also are welcome to forage for food in different park systems as well for mushrooms and other berries and edibles. So the program that different community groups use to establish a local level growing area is called the Partners in Parks program. And this Partners in Parks program is one where anyone can bring an idea and a location forward, and then the city will help through some funding and some facilitation to actually make it happen. All of these initiatives really become a community development process too. And we try and bring in local residents to also work in the gardens to keep them self-sustaining and keep often with community gardens, they seem to be a drawing place, not just for people that maybe live in an apartment or don't have a space that they can grow on their own property, but often people are driving to these sites and maybe they do have their own large yard, but they're choosing to garden together. They're choosing to grow food as a social experience, and they want to be in a community that does that. And so these garden locations are, and the food forest locations are allowing them to do that, where they're part of something with other people and not just in their own private property. So we've found that very few of our participants are actually someone who doesn't have a place to grow their own food. Most people do, but they're seeking out this experience anyway. And one of the things that we're working on right now is some kind of an app and a marketing strategy to help get the word out about where people can do their own gleaning in town. So an app that could identify, for instance, all the fruit trees that are on city-owned property and all these communal beds I was mentioning, where you can go and pick your own fruit and harvest, or be part of the group that is growing the food and then harvest from it. But we are working on getting the word out so people can find, especially people who need the food, can find where it is in the community. And also to do more demonstration areas of growing at Bevan Park, and also at this East Wellington site as well. And recently, because of COVID and the realization, I guess, of everyone that we're on an island and a lot of our food in the future could be very limited, there's also been, and I'll let Karin speak more about this, but strategy that's been developed through the Homelessness and Housing Task Force, and just looking at what Nanaimo's emergency response could be, and the potential for growing more locally. What could we do if the pandemic continued or our food supply was cut off, and how we would respond as a community to that. And there's lots of ideas to make that happen, but we do have these 500 hectares of parkland that in the future could be developed differently to help grow food locally. And so that's something that's been quite resounding through the Reimagine Nanaimo process, is having the city pick some priority sites potentially, or just look at how we might plan these sites for future development and have the food lens, and look at which sites would be most appropriate for different things, where there's water sources for different types of food, and using the East Wellington site that we're going through that process for right now as a real case study on how we could make that happen. And I think that might be the end of our slides.
I think that there was a few questions along the way. I'm wondering if it makes sense to kind of pop back up.
Sorry, I wasn't following the chat.
No, I know it's really difficult to do. I think the first one we did cover the one on gardening in yards, and then somebody asked Rob, what is causing the 18% increase in GHG emissions? Do we know?
Transportation is the biggest impact, and but closely behind that is basically buildings, energy for heating and cooling buildings, and it's things like oil heating or natural gas use would probably be the biggest culprits on that end.
So with the calculations, did we calculate the per person emissions? Like with the increase in the population, would that mean we'd have to even more go down, or are we looking at per person emissions?
No, they were absolute. Those numbers are absolute numbers.
Absolute. So the increasing population is kind of another factor.
Yeah.
And then I see
Karin,
Kate's also. Oh, yes, Terry.
Yeah, Karin, if I could clarify, I think the question came from earlier today regarding planting, say, a vegetable garden in your yard. When we were looking at the zoning and issues, is there anything stopping somebody from, having their whole front yard as a vegetable garden? Are there bylaws in place against that?
The best of my knowledge, there is not. Kirsty, have you ever heard of such a thing?
There are in some subdivisions. So there's no bylaw. There's no bylaw about food, growing food. There is about animals. And I think some people have picked that up in the chat. But there are certain subdivisions that have some pretty strict limitations. And there's been a discussion about condos and stratas as well that have some pretty strict definitions of what is aesthetically appropriate in a front yard. So there are in certain areas guidelines and limitations on front yards, but in a typical subdivision, the backyard is usually open. And we'd have to look at the definition of a nuisance. And this is where, even with our indicator work, the definitions have been one of the topics that was a big topic in the group I was in on Wednesday night. But everyone has a different aesthetic, and the idea of a nuisance, I'm not sure if it's picked up on for vegetable. I don't know how you could interpret that.
So Kirsty, with the subdivision, is that something that's privately regulated? Like you'd be moving into a subdivision and that, so that's not something that's, just to clarify, it's not something the city controls. That would be something you'd have to look at when purchasing a home.
The city can control it usually, as long as, because it's registered on the title often. And I actually live in a house that has one that is on the title. Bylaws can be called out if the developer, in my case, still lives in the neighborhood. But there's either a time limitation usually, or a causal effect of.
Right. I guess just to say, this was not a regulation introduced by the city. This would have been a regulation that was introduced by the private developer, right, put on the property title, and then from there. So just be buyer beware as far as purchasing a condo or a house in a subdivision.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. You know, thanks everybody. There are a lot of good links and information for people to go to. For instance, Joe mentions the Vancouver Island Regional Library is partnering with the Vancouver Island Master Gardeners Association for free gardening seminars. So thank you for that. Karin, you sent the donut economics link. Thank you. Yeah, there's Don's question about the bylaws. We talked about planning engagement in phase 2. So I don't know if anybody has more questions about that, but certainly go to the website. Right, there's more questions on the lot. Okay, yes, discussion on that. There was the question about the increase on GHGs. Yeah, part to population. So Tamara, you're saying, is the 18% increase due to population increase in part? And Rob, you said it was an absolute number.
It's an absolute number, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm just seeing if there's a question there. What parts of the public use area is common, and what part is under the control of each unit in strata bylaws? Oh, okay. So that's further on to the private lots that people have. Do you understand that question, Rob and Karin and Kirsty?
I don't think that was a question so much as a comment from Joe.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Right.
I know that Tamara above also mentioned, or no, it was Kate, protecting environmentally sensitive areas could help get us further towards our GHG goals. Rob, I don't know if you want to comment at all on that.
I think one of our, well, it's no surprise, anyone going into the park will see in many places invasive species are a concern. And I mean, if you go to some places like Butter Tubs, I'd say the bulk of what you see around you are invasive species. So protecting and turning around the level of invasive species intrusion in a lot of these natural spaces, I think, is going to be the biggest challenge going forward. But over time, making these places more biologically diverse and stable, irregardless of the changing climate, I think will have a great dividend going down into the future, and I think will help us to provide habitat, obviously, for wildlife, reinvigorate or redefine those wildlife corridors that we have, whether that's the Millstone and the riparian areas, or Lindley Valley, and eventually making more natural connections over time as we improve our forest canopy. Those might create more of those corridors, again, to connecting Lindley Valley to the city limits. So I would say yes, but there's a lot of work to do, I think, fundamentally. Some places are in a better place than others, of course, but I'd say that's going to be one of our biggest challenges, addressing invasive species and doing more of that restoration work that reintroduces or stabilizes that ecological diversity we want to see.
But we're constantly picking up new acquisitions of park. So every week we get new parks, whether they're small or big, whether we're buying them or whether they're coming through a subdivision or some other means. Sometimes it's a donation as part of a living will or an estate. And most of those acquisitions are because of an environmental sensitive feature that we're trying to protect. So most of our major acquisitions, at least, where the city is putting out money for large stretches of land, have been to protect those environmentally sensitive areas. And we do have a strategy for picking up more of those. It comes down to the right timing, usually, or the right threat, and then council's direction. But that's a main goal of our strategies, and hopefully the new strategy will also reflect that goal for acquiring park where we can to protect environmentally sensitive areas.
Kirsty, you also talked about the potential app. Someone's asking, Susanna's asking, is there a map or guide as to where these city communal gardens are?
That's what we're in the process of developing so that we can get the word out. Because this summer, to be honest, we had some food going to waste in some locations, and people were volunteering and collecting it and bringing it to different food banks. But the word wasn't out on some locations for sure. So we are working on developing the map and or online version that you can access on the go. So for instance, if you were on a walk and you see a fruit tree and wonder, can I go pick it? You would be able to click on and see, okay, yes, I am, I'm allowed. And the permissions and the information would be there. I also did see in the chat somebody asking about the damage that could be done to the ecosystem because of that. And that is definitely something that we haven't encountered yet. We haven't had a big group of people, other than when they take plants, like Salau has been one where we do have limitations on the removal, obviously, of desirable native plants in a park. But it might be in the future something we have to define and set rules for. The ethics of food forest harvesting have also been something of debate, because some people might come and strip a tree completely, whereas others might just take what they need that day. And there's no, I don't think there's a global ethic necessarily in our community for how that gleaning would happen. So something for future discussion for sure. Sure.
Okay. Natasha's asking about gardens in the north end of Nanaimo, or do we have those there, or even food forests in the north end?
I think that the furthest north currently is Bevan Park. I can't think of anything further north yet. And there has been discussion on Parkwood Drive in by Danes Park, if you're familiar with the Parkwood neighborhood. And of course, there was a community garden at one point on a gas station, which was not a city-owned property or city initiative. But otherwise, I think that's an interesting observation of these are community-driven locations. So perhaps that just there hasn't been a lot of appetite from residents to do that in the north end. I'm not sure, but we're always open to having more locations, and should probably long-term look at the equity as far as geographic distribution of productive sites, as well as the site itself, to see, is the land, would it be viable, or would raised beds have to be put in?
Sure. Well, Dover Bay Secondary School at their Eco Club is trying to address that too with their food forest on their site. So that's in the north. Okay.
Sorry, I think we skipped over one question from Dawn about forestry practices dwarfing many other sources. Is there anything we can do with this? In
terms of emissions, that's right. Yeah.
I don't know, Rob, if there is anything we can do about that there.
Sorry, say that again. What was the question?
Dawn commented that councillors Gazelbrecht and Brown highlighted that the emissions from forestry practices dwarf many other sources. So is there anything we can do at the municipal regional level to address that? It may be more
commercial forestry practice. Is that that was what they were driving at?
Maybe the forest, it says that emissions from forestry practices dwarf many other sources of emissions. So I guess there are other things that are under the municipal or regional level to address the emissions sources. I guess
Well,
you've been commenting on that.
I think addressing vehicle or transportation choice and providing more options for people to get out of single occupancy vehicles, I think will probably have the biggest impact. That and providing, whether through incentive or regulation, perhaps in the future, I don't know, looking at how we do energy assessments for existing homes and buildings, and provide opportunity for residents to switch from, say, oil heating or natural gas to electricity will probably have the biggest impact. But as I think my point, though, in my presentations was, we also need to be thinking about other options if we want to be reaching these targets that we've set for ourselves. And I think one area we really haven't put much of attention that we are now is looking at reforestation, is looking at some serious efforts around restoration work that involves planting more trees, addressing some of the invasive species issues in our parks, and creating more of that biologically diverse habitat that I think over time will sequester more carbon and benefit the community. But whether or not that's enough to address commercial harvesting, I can't speak to that.
Right. Okay. Tamara's asking, does the city help with access to water for community gardens and food forests?
Yes, with varying levels of success, yes, is the answer. So at Beaufort Park, for instance, and if you've been there, it's probably one of our largest sites. There are overground, like above ground rain storage barrels that have been used in the past to provide water. There is also one very small water service there with a hose for the community gardens, but it's not sufficient for the type of growing that's happening there. So that in that case, the city is looking at having a larger water surface installed. The community garden at Protection Island also has a water service. Water is a major limiting factor for a lot of these growing locations at the moment. And that's why certain things are working well and certain aren't in some various gardens. But most of the parks do have a small water service. It just may not have the capacity for the level of intensity of growing that is now happening on some of the sites.
Okay. Shea is asking about, is this parkland already cleared? Shea, do you mean the East Wellington Park area, or was it another parkland?
500 hectares that's available for.
Oh, the 500 hectares. Yeah.
It's varying conditions. So not all of it would be appropriate at all for having local food production on. A lot of it is heavily forested, but some of it is cleared. There's some of it that is in new subdivisions that's just seeded and grassed at the moment. It's varying conditions, and we haven't done an overall study of each of these parcels to see what would be the future appropriate uses. They all have zoning attached to them that defines what can and can't be done, but food production is something that can happen in any of those zones. So really it comes down to the soil conditions and the appetite of the neighborhood for amenities that they want to have in their neighborhood at the moment.
Okay. All right. There's a concern about gleaning trees and berry bushes. Commercial growers have often stopped U-pick because the public damages the trees to the point where they no longer produce. So if the public is going to allow to glean, will a watchdog as well as teaching how to pick really necessary? Is really necessary? Sorry. So that's a suggestion, just so that the damage isn't there. And then, do you mean only chickens? Sorry, I missed that part of the presentation. What about rabbits, goats, etc.? I guess to help with.
I think that was a follow-up to an earlier chat.
The
Right.
bylaw.
Right. Okay. So
I think are they asking whether people are allowed to have rabbits and goats and what have you in their yard?
I'm not sure if Joe wanted to clarify that. You could unmute yourself, Joe, if you're still with us. Yeah, or add it to the chat again. I'm not sure we're going to get to all the chats, but I will promise that I will nag Rob and Kirsty and Karin to follow up and answer these questions, and we can include it with the summary that will be on our website if that's okay.
That's fine, Terry. Sure.
Yeah. Okay.
I just changed to our last slide. Our contact information is on this slide. So if you have a question, or maybe it's better to go through Terry perhaps and just send us the questions and we can answer them as a group.
Sure. Yeah. One of the beauties of recording is that we've recorded all the chats as well. So we can send, capsulize, summarize the questions and get them to you so we can get our answers.
That's fine.
Okay, I'm going to try to see if we've got a couple of more questions we can get to. If you see a space that needs to be an environmentally sensitive area, how do you go about getting that addressed? ESA, how do you get that?
There are areas we already know through some past studies that there's some environmentally sensitive areas such as riparian areas, for example. So there's an understanding that what a healthy riparian area would look like and what needs to be there. And when we don't see that, so like a very small or narrow strip of vegetation and shrubs, when it should be a more diverse stand of trees and various levels of vegetation next to a water course or a wetland, then that's kind of our guidelines. So there's lots of examples of some work going on now. Harewood Centennial would be a good example. There's a very narrow riparian area for many years along the Chase River there, but there's been a lot of recent work to recreate a more diverse 15-meter riparian area that's been fenced off now, and some of that work's carrying on behind John Barsby, for example. But I think the limitation somewhat is in our resort, the amount of staff time and resources that we can direct to it. We work a lot with volunteers. We do hire professional biologists to do some of the restoration plans, but there's so much money and so much resources that we have that we can direct toward this. So we prioritize as best we can. So we also work with partners like Nature Trust of BC and Ducks Unlimited for again, for expertise and resources to help. And VIU has also been involved in some projects as well, and working with some of their faculty. Okay.
All right. Well, why don't we finish off with this question? It's a compliment. Thrilled about the city putting funds to 5 Acres Farm. Person also sees an ideal area cleared field across Park Avenue that would make a fabulous farm. Does the city look for opportunities for putting funds towards more urban farms? That they're great for training new farmers. And does the city staff look at growing more fruit bearing and edible landscaping instead of ornamentals?
So I can answer the one about the fruit trees. Where appropriate, our staff do look at putting fruit trees into park locations. It's not something that we typically would do on street locations, but definitely within parks. It's something that our horticulture staff would look at as an appropriate species. They would determine what an appropriate species is for each site. So the answer for that is yes, but with conditions, and that's where we really need consistent either maintenance agreements with a community group for gleaning, or we're hoping to have some more public gleaning, because our staff typically wouldn't do the gleaning of something like that. They would look more at the community for gleaning. And we haven't had a lot of success with how it's been going in some locations in recent years. So just need to formalize that more. In our community gardens, we have agreements set in place with different groups where gleaning of that specific area by the group happens, and different safety standards are followed. So if a community wanted fruit trees in a park, it's something that the city would look at.
And in terms of the question about acquiring urban farms, So I'm coming from the housing perspective, right? And obviously food security, very important. Demonstration farms really important. But when we think about a city and where we want to put things ideally and the best use for various things, you've heard about how much transportation contributes to our GHG emissions. We also have to make sure that where there's opportunity to add housing for residents, that is placed in a way where we can minimize transportation emissions too. So we often think at a regional scale in terms of where's the best place to grow food versus where's the best place to place housing, because we don't want to use up all our core area food. And I'm a huge fan of the urban farming. I loved getting out there myself. But we also have to think about if we put all the urban farms in the downtown or the central area and push housing out, then we'll just be driving up those GHG emissions with transportation. So it's a balancing act.
And of course, that said, East Wellington Park, which we've spoken about, is a unique opportunity, really, and that could be an example where there will be that opportunity in the future once the park plan's finished.
Well, thank you all so very much, Kirsty, Karin, and Rob. Very, very interesting, very valuable. We'll pay you what we paid all our other speakers, which is and nothing, no dollars at this time. Just please do accept our appreciation for your excellent presentation, and in advance of following up to all these questions, I see 30 new messages that I haven't even looked at yet. So a lot of interest in the topic.
Well, you know how you guys could pay us back is signing up to the Get Involved site and then participating in phase 2. We would love to have your
That's a good
participation.
idea. That's a good idea.
But like Heichka Terry, thank you so much for inviting us today. I have to hop off here in a couple minutes, but I really appreciate this.
Thank you so much. And I guess at this point, Rob, if you stop sharing, we could ask people to go to the gallery view and just give us all a wave. Give us all a wave of who you are.
Quebec, it's you.
I was just sending you a note that it was such a great presentation. Thank you. I really enjoyed it.
Oh, hey.
Just wanted to see what my coworkers are doing.
Great. Thank you all so much. We're gonna go right into, if you want to go back to speaker view again, we're gonna go right into our closing session, which is really a bit of a debrief and a chance to hear from you through chat, or if you wanted to come on screen, you can unmute yourself and share your video. Bye, Karin. We have a few questions for you, I guess, and again, thank you all, especially those that were with us over the 2 days for all or most of the session. We'd really like you to share what was your biggest light bulb moment or your biggest takeaway from the session and from the summit. And then also on the opposite side, what could we learn from you for the next time we offer a summit like this? And hopefully it'll be in person, but help us to plan the next summit. So what recommendations do you have for us? So maybe we'll just start with those two questions. What was your biggest light bulb moment? What was your favorite thing about the summit? If you can narrow it to one, and then how can you help us for future planning? So if you want to put that in the chat or raise your hand or just unmute your microphone or your video and share that with us.
I can share some, Terry.
Sure.
Yeah, wow. Every presentation was so amazing. I learned so much, and it was so beautiful to see the community come together and brainstorm and get innovative and ideas. And some big light bulb moments for me was, I think it was the very first session. Yeah, I don't know why I never thought about this before, but how it's cheaper to eat unhealthy than it is to eat healthy, and how we, and then there was this idea that the government, I just think, yeah, like everything could change if the government really got how everyone would benefit and actually would save, the government would save money if there was education and support around like farmers being supported and people being supported in eating well. And it just became more I don't know, just that it somehow became part of our system that farmers were like, especially small scale farmers, and people just had all their basic needs met. That was amazing to me. Yeah, I just think, and then like everyone would be healthier and the environment would be, I just really wish that on the government level, on, you know, of course, regional, I'm so thrilled that the regional government was here, and I know that, you know, Paul Manley is advocating for things like this on the provincial level, and of course Sheila
Federal level.
on the federal level, yeah, sorry, and then Sheila on the provincial level, and yeah, but that's what I think our future, and then of course working together in community to make sure that we all have good food, good access to good food. Yeah.
Does anybody else want to share their light bulb moment on screen? We can read some of the chats, or you can look over the chats as well. But here's your platform.
I have a few light bulb moments, but actually the presentations I saw all blew me away. That I learned more about seaweed and why that's important than I ever would have dreamed. And I was so inspired by that. And the Eco Kids Club at Dover Bay, I was like totally amazed. I can't even believe that they have a business going, basically, and the dedication there. One of my light bulb moments was when Chris Brown said that the farmers need an entrepreneur, somebody in the middle, to help them get their produce to market and do the marketing piece. And when he said how Farmship had spent so much time and energy trying to market when they could have been growing and doing what they really love to do. And I thought, well, there's a huge opportunity there in between the farmer and getting the food to the public. I hope that some people will step in because it is true that a lot of farmers don't want to spend all those hours at a market, or just can't. And you know what? Anyway, that was a big light bulb. One of the things that I would have liked, and that maybe logistically there was a reason not to, but when we had a 15-minute break only, I would love to have had the Zoom open, so that we could just say hi to people and see who is there while we had our video on. I wanted to be a little bit more connected to who else was on the call. So
yes,
just during the 15 minutes, that would be good.
Yeah. Honestly, we probably should have set up as a networking Zoom site. What we were doing in those 15 minutes is getting the next session ready, and you know, we were just trying to get things on the fly. But good comments, Suzanne. I'd like to say it's a good segue into what we also want you to think about, besides light bulb, how you can help us. But what are you going to do? What are 3 things that you're going to do, or you're going to advocate on behalf of your neighbors or your city or your region to really improve local food supply? So if you could share those as well, like not necessarily, I'm not saying just to you, Susanna, but to others, in addition to those light bulb moments or things we could do better, what are you going to do? What personally steps are you going to do? And the first thing I was going to do after today was send my rancher brother-in-law and sister, do you know about seaweed and how, you know, because they have upwards of now 3,000 head of cattle, and those are huge methane dispensers, and just the healthier, you know, the healthy diet, the improvements, the lower vet bills, all those things. That's the first thing I'm going to do. I'm not sure they're aware.
I already did my first thing. I signed up immediately for the 12-week be your own grocer course.
Oh, good for you. Good for you. Others want to share those? Now there's 3 questions. Light bulb, what we can do better, and what are you personally going to do yourself, or what are you going to advocate for?
So if I can jump in really quickly, Terry, thank you. That was really awesome. Unfortunately, I was down at Piper's Lagoon doing an invasive plant removal party, so I missed the early one. So I am hoping that it will be available to view the background because I really wanted to see the Dover kids. We've been working with the Eco Kids on a few different things, and it's just wonderful to see what people are doing. I agree as well, Susanna. I miss the whole networking of in live summit, because even I know Shelley was on here and I couldn't get my computer or my mute unmuted and my video on, so I wasn't able to actually talk. So I love that idea. I think it's great to be able to see people and actually connect and just chat, and the ideas that are coming out of people just listening to other ideas has been fantastic. I love hearing about what some of the thoughts and suggestions in there. The seaweed was super interesting to me too, because I'd never heard that. And we are working on some gleaning opportunities, and like what Kirsty was saying, some way of advertising where, well, not advertising, but informing people where trees, edible trees or fruit trees or nut trees are available for people to use privately and publicly. So we are working on that project, and hopefully that will be coming out in the near future. But thank you so much for putting it together. It's been really fun. Oh, there's Shelley. Hi, Shelley. Nice to see you in face. Thank you.
Yes.
And I wanted to share as well, for me, I'm brand new into this sort of space. So for me, I just love knowing as a community what everyone's doing out there. And I know we're in Harewood, we have a small little house, a small little garden, and I would love, especially COVID was kind of a big reminder of let's be a little more self-sufficient. And you start looking at mental health, et cetera, et cetera. So we all know if we can grow our own stuff, we know what's on what we are eating. Therefore, we're in a way better position of, I don't know, power for ourselves in that sense. So I absolutely loved everything here. What you're doing in the schools is just absolutely mind-blowing. I'm gonna have to reach out to get to know more about that program. We're looking at hydroponics because of small space. So I'd like to see what other people are doing in the community. We looked at some that are being made, some systems for about $200 just to get started. My spouse is a builder, so we said, hey, let's go build it next weekend, you know? So I would love to see if we can help anyone else. And I'm in Harewood, we applied for a neighborhood small grant. So we're about to start knocking on doors and just seeing how we can help people out. Do you want to grow this for the year? We can build the systems for you. And I love hearing that the CSA never knew much about that. And it really looks like we're looking for connection as well, the middleman. So I know my friend who just started his business, and he's connecting urban farmers with garden beds or hydroponics. So I'm just thinking he's a very techie guy. So I'm just thinking, as I'm hearing this, I would love to reach out to everyone on this chat who is working in that space, just to see if we can put you on the same platform as someone's doing it already. And one thing, exactly like you said, if moving forward, so I'm totally going to join Transition Nanaimo because this was absolutely amazing. And I'm from the Young Professionals in Nanaimo group. So this is absolutely very much in line with where we want to go. Even if there was like once a week on a Thursday where we did Zoom breakout rooms, because that's when I feel like we managed to really connect. I couldn't get my video on, but if we could, whoever has something that they're working on, this green space, whether it's emissions or making our community a better place, we can show up and you have a 15-minute breakout room with different people. We can have tea, coffee, and we get to talk about this. Like I would love that. So thank you so much, everyone. Hi, Jack.
Well, thank you. Thanks. Very nice comments, Sarah. Thank you. Thanks for being here. I invite Shea and Dawn to join me, and Marjorie, if you're here, to also come on screen. They joined me in putting this session on, so I think they should join in this wrap-up session with me. So please unmute yourself and start your video if you could. Maybe you're there.
We're here.
We're here. Great. We're here. I've just put myself on gallery view so we can see everybody. So yeah, there's still 20 of us or 21 of us, so that's great. Other people that want to share light bulb things we could do better, and what you're personally going to do.
So Terry, I think I saw Shaya's hand up, and then I was going to share something as well.
Okay, all right, go ahead, Shay.
No, I just was waving. I was saying I'm here. I'm good.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
I thought you, I thought
Okay.
you had something to share. Okay.
Go ahead, Don.
This sort of combines the two. This idea is still bouncing around in my head. I was having a conversation with Asia. I was a moderator for her session. And when we were talking, she raised the problem of there just aren't enough people who want to do farming, or they just want to do it for themselves, just live the lifestyle, but they don't want to be growing a lot of food for other people. Well, we've got all these farmers retiring and not a lot coming up. That's a big problem. So where my mind goes, I sort of think, well, maybe it's not about scaling up, maybe it's about scaling down. And then she said, what if every 10th person grew enough food for 10 people? And that idea has just been bouncing around in my head ever since. And I thought, let's take it even one step further. What if we have every 5th person grew enough for 5 people? Make it even more manageable in terms of a size. And that's exactly what Sarah was talking about. So what I'm hoping to bring to Transition Nanaimo for consideration is how could we be involved in supporting that as an idea? And then it's about if one in every 5th home had a little backyard garden which grew just enough food for 3 or 4 people, we wouldn't need very many before we're feeding the entire community. Or we at least have it's like the Victory Garden concept of World War II. So the other thing I just want to say is I was just blown away by all the amazing things that are happening in our city, both at the level of our city officials, but also at the level of all the community groups. I mean, I am just really proud of Nanaimo. I mean, I'm sorry, but Nanaimo rocks when I hear all the things that are happening. Really, really impressive. So this has been such an eye-opening summit for me as well.
Yes. And I know, Dawn, you could share with Sarah your research into hydroponics and maybe some tower gardens. She was looking at a $200 investment for her small, I guess, because of their small plot size. So other people can get into sort of having vertical gardens where space is an issue.
Yes, and I forgot to mention that when you were talking, Sarah, we actually have a tower garden that we have out on our balcony during the summer. So we actually did one of our radio interviews were with 2 people, one who does tower gardening, so the small home-sized ones, and another person who does tower farming, the larger commercial scale, actually looking to do it as a farming business. So I can send you the link to that, those 2 interviews.
Thank you, Don. Any others on still participating in this that want to share?
I'd like to share.
Great, thank you.
Hi. Thank you so much for all the work you put into this. I thoroughly enjoyed all of it, and I feel so much more informed and connected to my community. I mean, I live alone, so this last year has felt very isolating, and I've been thinking about growing food, and I've been concerned about food, and then to connect with all of you and to find out everything that's happening in the community. I feel very hopeful, and I feel empowered, and I feel like I found a tribe. Like I feel like I belong somewhere in this community. So I'm so, so grateful to all of you for being here. And yeah, like many others, I was blown away by the amount of resources that are out there. The agrarian farms. I plan to sign up for the Grow My Own Groceries.
Great.
And what I'm really appreciating is the grassroots direction of this, how people in the community are being heard, and the initiatives are coming from the community and they're blossoming up. So that seems really important to me, that it's, yeah, there's a top-down global concern, and there's this grassroots also meeting up, and it's unique to Nanaimo, and it's unique to the people that live here and what our needs are. So some ideas, I don't know, maybe it exists already, but a platform for networking, kind of like what Sarah was putting out with, that so we can connect more and support each other and share creative ideas.
Well,
And
remember, Tamara, remember joining Transition Nanaimo is free, just like the summit. So that's, that's a way of, we'll have more people that connect that way. The membership is, offering the membership is new for us. And so there's a link on the website, transitionnanaimo.ca, so that you can join. And we want to extend the networking going forward for sure.
that's great. That's great. Thank you for that, Terry. And then just coming forward, a topic to explore might be water, because as we're growing gardens, we're going to need water. And I spent some time in Brazil, and they all have these big water tanks on their roofs where they capture the water. And we could be doing that in our city. We get a lot of rain here, and we just rely on building big dams and chlorinating water when we have water coming through. So that was one of my ideas for
Thank you.
exploration. Yeah.
Thank
Anyway,
you for sharing.
thank you
Thank
very
you.
much.
All right.
Terry, can I jump in just on Tamara's comment?
Sure.
Just a little infomercial real quick. March 22nd to April 22nd is Water to Earth Month, which is in combination with RDN and NALT and the city and a few other ones. But there's some really great workshops on there on water smart gardening and water smart this and other things. So have a look. It's under, I'll try and share it in the link or send it to Terry. But if you go onto the RDN's website and get connected, it will be in there, and we're adding stuff in there all the time. So go back and have a look. The same with gardening type of different types of workshops that you can get involved in. Have a look. It's really good information.
Was that NALT?
Yeah, if you could put it, you could put
It's
the
under,
link in the chat. That'd
yeah,
be
I'll
great.
see if I can put it into the chat. It's through the RDN and the city of Nanaimo, but we work in partnership with NALT and Mosaic, and we used to do it in live. It was part of our Water to Earth Day live events where we would do watershed tours, and we are doing a few live walks, but most of the workshops will be online. But I will get the link and then add it to the chat.
Great.
Thank you,
so
Deborah. Okay.
much. It's so
Do
easy.
others
with
wanna-
community. It's so easy.
Pardon?
Things
Pardon me,
happen
Tamara?
easily and things happen so quickly and easily in community.
Yes, yes. Do others want to come online and share personally, or I haven't been reading the chat, but if there's questions in the chat, help me out, Shay or Dawn. But if anybody else wants to share.
Margaret.
This is Margaret. Oh, go ahead, Shelley.
Oh, just a quick one. I just want to emphasize that it's really important for all of us to be involved in the Reimagine Nanaimo part, the community's input, because it's really, really important for the counselors to know what is valued here, and all the stuff that we've talked about is extremely valuable in it. This is an opportunity. The planning that's going on with Reimagine Nanaimo is going to last for like 10 to 15, 20 years. And so we're looking in the future, and if we want to know what is going to be implemented and brought forth, then we really need to be part of that. That's all I wanted to say.
Great. Margaret?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that I have attended every session over the last 2 days. And I honestly thought, oh, it's going to be so much and I'm going to be overwhelmed. And after every session, I thought, well, that was my favorite. And then I would hear the next one and I would be, that was my favorite. It's like they were all so good. They were different. They were all informative. They were engaging. And they were excellent. And I'd like to thank everybody who was involved. I know Terry and Dawn and Shea were very involved, and Mika was as well. Some other people who aren't here, but you have done an excellent job. And there may be some nepotism here, but I had sort of a close look at all of the work that you went into, all of the work in terms of the emails, the phone calls, the Zooms to prepare for this. You guys did a lot of work and it showed, it paid off, and bravo to you. And I love Sarah's idea of meeting once a week, just to connect, not just about this farming and food and farming, but just about the whole climate change, all of the issues around this. It would be awesome to just have, a drop-in once a month or once a week. Something like that would be great. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah. I'll turn it over. I saw Dawn's hand, but I do want to comment that yes, the content was amazing, but that really came down to 7 groups of people that tailored their message for us. I mean, we put it out there and we relied on them coming up with the content and putting the effort into the presentations, and that was amazing that people took the time to do that. And, all 7 groups will certainly pass on the thank you. Dawn, did you have? I saw your hand.
Yes, thank you, Terry. 2 things. First of all, thank you, Margaret, for your thanks. And I would also like to let people know that Margaret was a big part of this as well. Margaret did a lot of the graphics for our website, and very much appreciate all that she contributed to this. One of those behind the scenes heroes. So big shout out to Margaret. A little bit of nepotism there since Margaret happens to be my wife, but which is why she was probably willing to help out. The other thing I wanted to mention is we do a weekly radio show, and because of COVID, obviously it's being pre-recorded. But one of the things that I would like to look at is how to turn that into a weekly, or if not weekly, a regular call-in show where people have a chance to come together to ask their questions, share ideas, and make it a more interactive experience than just, one person interviewing a guest. So our next one actually is on Wednesday night at 7 p.m. We're having a call-in virtual town hall with Ben Gesselbrock and Tyler Brown, the 2 city councilors. And that's going to be anyone who wants to join us can do so. We'll post the link to that in the chat. We're asking people to register through Eventbrite so we know how many to expect. And that way we can ensure we've got enough capacity on our Zoom account for however many people are expected to attend. But that idea that Sarah was suggesting is maybe that could be one of the avenues where we come together to share ideas and what's happening and brainstorm going forward. I think we've just started something today, or these last 2 days.
Mm-hmm. Yes, very much so. Thank you, Dawn. And that is running Wednesday night at what time?
It's Wednesday night at 7 o'clock, and we'll be recording it, and that will be the episode that runs the following Tuesday. Okay. And that's going to be that's going to be a monthly, the 3rd Wednesday of each month. We're planning to have a virtual town hall with the councilors.
Okay, great. Well, that'll take care of one of the weeks per month. Yeah, so excellent. Other comments, suggestions, action plans that people are going to personally make? I guess on behalf of the organizing committee and all the speakers, thank everyone so much for your participation. It really is a great community, a great region, a great island that we're fortunate to live on. We've had people from across the Atlantic Ocean. We had people from the mainland. We had, I don't consider though they were guests, they were part of the conversation, and they shared with us. So thank you all so much. We are going to record and summarize the comments to the Reimagine Nanaimo process. We have recorded. We are going to eventually get on our website, so watch the website for updates. Do join Transition Nanaimo. It's free. There's strength in numbers, and if you can donate, we certainly would appreciate it. With that, I'll say goodbye, and I don't know if you want to add anything, Dawn or Shea, please do. But thank you all so much. It's been a great couple of days. I'm going to miss this. I'm going to miss connecting the way we did.
Yeah, thank you, Terry. And I just want to say what a pleasure and honor it has been to work with the 2 of you to put this on. It was an idea, and then it was like, okay, can we make this happen? And then enrolling the support, Mika and Emma and Jeremy and Tian and the youth. I just really want to thank and honor the youth for stepping up and helping us to make it possible, and Margaret, of course, too. And just wow, like it really shows you what's possible when with a team, a team of people. because the idea first time, I was like, how are we going to pull this off? It just seemed like impossible. And yet everyone played their part, and just, we all went full steam ahead, and it worked incredible. And so, yeah, I feel so thrilled and proud. And I know it is just the beginning, and I look forward to furthering the conversations and deepening and seeing how we can all work together to make our community and be a model for sustainability, equitability, and just living more in harmony with each other in the land. So thank you all so much for your participation and your support.
Yes, thank you, Shea. And what I wanted to just say is I really want to thank everyone who showed up and attended, because without you, there wouldn't have been a summit. Well, there would have been presenters, but they would have been presenting to a blank screen, and that would have been really boring.
Yeah.
But our experience of putting this on was very much like, I think it was either Kirsty or Karin who said that it feels like they have jumped out of the plane and they're building the plane on the way down. Well, that's kind of what it was like to put on this summit. We just decided we were going to do it, and we built the plane on the way down. But it's been, and I have just been so thrilled with the outcome. And as Margaret said, Terry and Shea, you have been amazing. The Dover Bay Eco Club, the VIU Eco Club, we've had so many people helping us out. It's really been a team effort, and I'm really thrilled at what we have managed to put on, and thrilled with all of the speakers. And as I said, would not have been possible either without you people attending. So thank you for spending your Friday and or Saturday with us. We really appreciate it.
Yes, let's go out and enjoy the sun. It's shining, it's beautiful out there, and let's
and I will mention, I did post the link if you are interested in attending on Wednesday with Ben and Tyler. The link is in the chat before we close it down.
And sign up for Be Your Own Grocer and join us, please. Bye, everybody.
Yes, thanks, everyone. Bye. Great to see you all. Meet you all.